the main issue in life. When I was studying the human being, wanting to understand what is the bottom line, what is the issue why humans behave like they behave, what is the issue why humans having reason fight with each other, what is the issue that also makes us sick. And as I was studying this, I came to a conclusion, and I will share in this lecture that conclusion. We have seen that the human being has a structure that is fixed, cannot be changed. We have seen that we have a fixed function, that is a set function. And we have basic needs that needs to be given and used in order that function should work. Now we go through them. We have seen that the human being is a soul that has two different kinds of organs. So we have the brain that is connected with all the organs of the body, and we have the spirit that through thoughts and decision gives the power to the brain. And we have seen in the structure that identity is the way I see myself. And so, to put it very clear, identity is the starting button of every function in our human being. So, identity is a structural thing. And this structural thing, like in every device, you must have a starting button to press in order it should start. And all I could see in humanity is that who he thinks he is that what determines everything in his life. Because it's the pushing button that starts the human being to function. So we have now a structure. We have two different kinds of organs. And we have seen we have a subconscious. And in the subconscious, the identity is that which is at the beginning of everything in our lives. So identity is the button that puts into function the human being. And that's very important to know where is that thing that I must push in order to correct if the identity is having a wrong content. So the next important issue is functioning. Everything, as we have seen according to the law, and we'll see once again today, is a channel. The body and all physical elements have only the ability to react, never to act. The spirit has the ability to act and react. Everything that is physical, our brain, that is the capital of our body, is governed from outside of them. They cannot govern themselves. They only react. Everything that which is spirit governs himself only from inside. It's dependent as a channel, as we will see, but it's still a governing from the inside. So that's a main difference that we should never forget, because we must understand when we want to come to the main issue why we have that issue. Now, as we have two kinds of different organs, we have also different needs. So the body needs electricity and chemistry. That is clear. There's no question, because all of that we can measure. But the spirit is also dependent. He needs love, that is a spiritual information. All the needs of the spirit are spiritual. He does not need water or food. He needs words. I just was speaking the other day with a lady who left her husband because he did not take time for her to speak nice with her. And of course, there are plenty of people out there, when you're quite attractive, to come to you and say nice words. And now, nice words. Are that what we need? But is it right to leave your husband to go to someone else to get those nice words? Because what we also need, and is inseparable from the words, from the information that the words bring to us, is we must attach, we must bind to the source of information. That is an inside action of the Spirit. He binds himself to the source where he takes it. That's why when to a lady or to a guy, but especially to ladies, someone comes along and says nice words, they just follow that person. Because, yes, the information the person gives and the person are two different entities. But as we need the person to take the information from, we must have always two things. It's the same thing as in the physical world. As we have seen, in order that something should function, we need at least two elements to put that into function. And here the Spirit needs two elements. He needs a binding to a source of information, and he needs, of course, the information itself. So those are the two groups of needs. And now we look to the law once again and understand that everything must function according to this law. Nothing can exist or function by itself, and nothing can do anything for itself. Now, that's most important to understand, and I repeat this, even though I hope you understood it. But even though I found this law and saw this law, it's not my finding, it's self-evident that it is so. Putting my mind into thinking around these things is really opening up my whole spiritual view. Understanding these two basic things that include everything of everything in the universe, we can understand what is our issue. As a channel, physically and spiritually, we cannot exist or function by ourselves. We have seen we need needs, and we have to take those needs. But those needs are not for us, but they are there in order that we should give them. So that when we give them, when it comes out of the Spirit, when we give love to others, that feeds the body with electricity, with the right powers. So if the right power is taken in, then the right thing comes up in the body. That's why everything must have an entrance and an exit, and everything must have a cause and an effect. And everything must work in a circuit. That means where it starts, it also comes back. Now this is most important to understand it today as we look to the dependencies of the soul. The human being is a soul, and he has the brain with all the organs of the body, and he has the spirit, and he has the starting button, his identity. And as we have seen, this identity is a lie, it's a wrong content there. We are getting confused about our dependencies. So that the brain needs chemistry and that we need to be bound for chemistry to nature is no question. But that the spirit needs to be bound to someone, that we don't know. But that is exactly the connection between that what makes the electricity, that makes the whole function of the whole soul. So if the spirit is bound correctly, then everything he guides will be nice and perfect. But if he is wrong, what happens then? So let's come to the main issue that humans have. It is identity. And we have seen this before, and we go once again through them because we want to point that thing out that is most important, that is the main issue, that is the place where we have to work to take away the cause of disease. Because we have seen that the human being thinks he's a god, and as a god, he is unaware that he's spiritually dependent. Of course, he cannot be a god, so he is spiritually dependent, but he believes he's spiritually independent. And we have seen that in the last presentation. Then he is very possessive. He thinks things are his. His body is his life is his, while none of them can be true because neither he made his body nor gave himself life. He only lives it. He can possess nothing at any time. Then he, thinking he's a god, he thinks he does everything out of himself. That means he has something to give from him. And so we think when we share nice words, we give them for ourselves. We think when we give time or spend time with someone, we use our own time. And if we share love, we think we use our own love. But nothing of them is true. Everything that comes out of us must first be taken in. We cannot be more than a channel. That's why everything we do does not come from us, it just comes through us. That's most important. It does not come from us, but it comes through us. And then, if we believe we are a god, everything revolves around me. I am the center of the universe. That's the error. And then the truth is nothing revolves around me. All issues of man come because he revolves around himself. It's him who is in danger. It's him who has all these issues. And we can see that especially in the time today where it's all about me and my life. And we have seen that we must avoid loss. There's no way to ever accept personal loss. That's why if we are gods, everything that happens to us that is negative, we take it personally. While the truth is, it is not a personal loss. We think it's personal as a god, and we know it's the Creator's loss, it's not my loss. And then you must be a victim whenever something is yours, when it is taken away, or when you have spent something and it is not returned unto you, you must consider yourself a victim. And being a victim leads to all the issues on that what comes afterwards. Everyone understands when he realizes he's a victim, that's negative. Because it cannot be true. Only a god can be a victim, because only to a god you can take something personal away. Because he's the creator of everything. But you cannot take to a creature something away, because it possesses nothing. But it can live and administer everything like it was his, if he would be in the right identity. So at no time we can be a victim. So the problem is that we are born with this lie, I am God. And the main issue of this wrong identity is that we think we are spiritually not dependent. But we act always dependent because we cannot act otherwise. So the main issue of the wrong identity is that humans do not know the spiritual dependency. This is what I could observe in every human being. There was never a case in which not the wrong dependency was the issue of that person and the issue or the cause of his disease. So there was a 48-year gentleman who came into my practice because for 5 years he had an infection of his left ear. And that infection of that left ear brought him to me. It was not the only symptom he had. 5 years just before the infection of the ear came, he lost his sexual ability at the age of 45 or 44. Then he got his infected ear, and he was now in an institution to solve his depression and burnout syndrome. Now you take that man, he's an educated man, biology professor, and you know, when you talk to him, when you want to know the issue of man, his disease must come because he's dependent on something he cannot control, something he cannot change or have access to. So I asked him about his history. And he told me that he came into the issue in a moment when his youngest daughter, he has 4 children, and the youngest daughter was 6 years old when she was selling cherries on the street. You know, when the season of cherries are and other seasons, some children sell it on the street. And so she wanted to pass the street to get some more cherries, and a car came, hit the child, and she passed away. And that happened 9 years before. So after 4 years of suffering, of being in prison because he cannot make his child alive again, he lost his sexual ability. And then came the ear, and then came the depression. Because his spirit is in prison by the way he is dependent from his child. I asked him and said, you see, before you had the child, you had 3 children, and you were happy. And he said, yes. Now that you lost the child, why could you not go back in time, in your mind, and think like you didn't have the child, like the time before you lost it, or before you had the child? Because you see, now that you have no child, before you have one that is born, then you feel well. But now that you lose it after 6 years, you destroy yourself. Why? Because he binds his spirit to his child, as thinking his life purpose is dependent on the life of his child. Now also he is bound to his wife. And whenever people lose things, they must find one that is guilty for that. And he might give guilt to himself and guilt to his wife. And so he's dependent on her as well. If she or I would have been more paying attention, things might have been maybe avoided. Really? So now he is in an institution trying to fix his issue. But what institution knows that the issue is just that he wants something from a dead person? He wants something even from a living person, but that is not that what satisfies his need. We humans are not aware that we are spiritually dependent from the wrong source. We bound ourselves to those people that we think are ours and will fulfill our needs. Every issue comes from the wrong dependency, from searching love where there is none. You see, no species can provide for the individuals of that species the needs. They are always in another species. We need the physical needs to go into nature to pick them up. But where do we go for the spiritual needs? But if we are thinking we're gods, then we don't need any spiritual needs. We just exist and live by ourselves. Now, what helped me to see that everyone is dependent? As an ENT physician, I have also all ages and children. And I was wondering, why do children get sick? Why do they have a continual running nose or recurrent ear infection or coughing or throat pain or whatever they come in my practice that are chronic or even acute, but don't go back or just go back for a short while and then come back again? And now the law helped me, the structure helped me to understand why children get sick. We have the body of the mother and we have the spirit of the mother. And we know also that the child has a body and a spirit. And now we go to the beginning of a child. We see here a pregnant woman and also a child that is already a few years old. So we must understand, how does a child come into existence? And I think it's common knowledge that it comes from half of the mother and half of the father, as well spiritually, as well physically. It's 50-50 from each one. And they meet in a hole, they meet in the tube, and there they come together. And the moment the sperm and the ovula meets, a new individual starts from a life that was already existing. So every living being can only come from a living being. Yeah? The individual did not exist, but the life out of which it comes already exists in mother and in father. So now it starts to grow. But in order to grow, it needs nutrients. So as the embryo comes down into the uterus, he must connect to the uterus of the mother. Everyone that has a need must connect to the source where he has to supply his needs. So the umbilical physical cord, the child does. It is not mother that connects to the child. It is only the child that connects to the mother. Because the mother does not need the child. Because the mother has a source to take that is from nature. And so if mother has that source from nature, she does not need it from the child. So the body of the mother does not connect to the body of the child. It's always the body of the child that connects to the mother. Now, how dependent is the chemistry, the child, of how the mother's body is, of what the mother eats and drinks and thinks? Now, everyone will say 100%. Yes, because the child cannot depend on itself for existence. It must take from mother, from mother's body, the chemistry it needs. And if that would not be there available, or it might be the wrong thing available, then the child will have issues. Like the example, mother is sad and she drinks alcohol. Then that alcohol goes through the placenta and comes into the bodies, in the body of the child. And then, of course, the child is drunk. Now the question is, who made the child drunk? The mother or the child himself? And I put this question so that we might understand very clearly. The mother is just a supplier. Yes, she's responsible for what she supplies. But it's the child who takes that alcohol in and makes himself drunk. That's how the law functions. If the child could have a border to not take it in, then nothing would happen. But the child must take in everything that comes through the placenta, that is available for it, and so it makes herself drunk. This is very important. It's simple, but it's important to understand. A child cannot choose his mother. A child must take from that body that is available for it to take. But there is also a spiritual umbilical cord that binds to mother's spirit even before the physical binds itself. Because if the child's body needs electricity, the child can only do the electricity when it takes from mother, and it spiritually you take through trust, as we will see, and give it to the body. So as the child needs to govern the body in order to supply him with electricity, the spirit of the child must connect to the spirit of the mother before it can function. That's why it's so important to understand the child thinks, and its subconscious works from the moment of conception. So when those two entities come together, half body of mother, half body of father, when the two half spirits come together, we don't see them, then the child starts to think. Because many who listen to my presentation say, well, the child doesn't think. Yes, the child has not yet a consciousness. But we have seen that the function of thinking is a subconscious process. It is set because the function of thinking cannot be a thing that can be changed. It must be set like the function of the liver and the function of the eyes, and every function must be set before it starts to function. That's how we know it in everything that we have in nature and in everything we put together as devices that has to functions, like computers or robots or whatever we do. So the spirit of the child binds itself immediately because it needs love and it needs a source where it takes that. Totally unconscious. But we will see that trust is the element by which every spirit binds himself to the source where he takes and is dependent for information. So now we saw that the child is 100% dependent on what the mother eats and drinks. But how much is then the spirit of the child dependent on what mother thinks? Now it's also 100%. But this is mostly not known, that a child must supply its spiritual needs from mother spirits, from the mother spirit. And of course, this is not a visible connection, as the spirit is not visible, but it is nevertheless totally obvious. And we can see it especially when the child is out of mother's womb, that spiritual umbilical cord still exists. So there are two umbilical cords, a physical one and a spiritual one. We need two sources where we take our needs. That's our dependency. Now, the mother also needs chemistry for her body in order to take them in. And she's bound with her body to nature. We just inhale oxygen. That shows us that we're bound to nature. But mother also has a spiritual umbilical cord, or must take her spiritual needs. And the question is, where does she take it from? And usually she takes it from husband, mother, father, and finally also from the child, and trusts them. Now, if they have an issue, mother must take it over. The child is bound to mother, the child must take it over, and we find it in the body of the child. I've seen in my medical career children who were born with disabilities. And I was wondering, how does that happen? Because it cannot be something like we think it might be genes or chromosomes, but they must be from the beginning altogether. And someone needs to lead them. And that's the spirit that leads the functioning of the genes. But you find the child is born without an ear, so the other one is there correctly. Then you find sometimes that the child, just recently had a mother who told me that the child was born without the tibia, that's the bone of your leg. On one side, it was missing. How can that happen? You missed the bone. The whole bone was missing in the leg. So how those things come into existence? And understanding the laws of dependency, it's evident that the child's spirit must take something that does not fit its spirit from mother and puts it into the body, and now we see that the body has a dysfunction. Because only the spirit can lead things that in one half of the body that thing should happen. It must happen during the growing of the child. And who governs the growing of the child? It's the spirit of the child that governs all the processes in the body, like it is in the adult person. And there can never be how can I say, in laws, there can never be an exception. As is in adults, it must also be in children. It's always the same way to function. An eye functions in the child the same like it functions in an adult. You never have exceptions in the law. So here the spirit of the child governs the body, like we govern our body through our spirit. But since the food it takes doesn't fit to it, the child protests. The mother experiences loss because of her issues. Then the child picks it up and experiences loss because of her attachment to mom. So mothers are not aware of their, so to say, responsibility in the matter of what they think. No one has taught us. And now, listening to this, some mothers might come into guilt thoughts and thinking, oh, I'm guilty because my child was born like this. No, there is no guilt. Because guilt can only appear when one has a choice. And in order that one has a choice, he must have the ability to not be connected to the wrong source. He must have a knowledge of this, but knowledge alone doesn't make you able. But without knowledge, you cannot become able. And you need, of course, an ability to put that into practice. But no one has taught the mothers how we function. So if things don't go right, they are just a call to realize things that are going on in our lives. Disease is just a cry for that spiritual need, that correct spiritual connection that is not there because it's the wrong spiritual connection. Mother has no choice as long as she has the wrong identity to bind herself to her husband. And she cannot control her husband. If the husband gets crazy and goes with another woman while she's pregnant or before she becomes pregnant from him, then she carries that in her spirit, in her memories. And that gives an effect into the body. And that effect the child must take over. And I've seen it in actual cases, how during pregnancy, when something happened to mom in her marriage relationship, how then the child had certain deficiencies. But it is not a guilt issue. It is that no one knows how things work. And if you don't know how things work, how shall we ever become aware of it, or how shall we ever avoid it? So disease is, in my eyes, a sign to see that something is wrong, to get to check ourselves, to see, okay, where is this coming from, in order that I can solve the issue. So there is no guilt. It is just an acknowledgement that we are dependent beings. And the wrong dependency must lead to a wrong result. If we would not have the wrong result, or if we would have the result in our bodies, we would not be aware that we are connected wrongly. See, if I would have not had disease, I would have never seen that the human has a spirit that is connected to the wrong source. I would have never seen that. So there is no condemnation for those who have a disease. It's a revelation rather. They see something physically that must come from their mind, from the way they think. Now, I could speak very long about this, but it's very important to understand the process. That's why I also speak slowly, because it is basically to understand it. Now, the time comes that the child comes out of the mother's womb. The umbilical cord is taken away from mother, but at the same time, the child must bind to nature, because it cannot change its needs. It must breathe. Now, before, the mother was the supplier of the oxygen. Now it's the air that supplies its oxygen. And yes, the mother is for a while, the body of the mother, while she takes some food, the milk from the mother. But soon comes the time when mother's body is insufficient. Because the principle in nature is this: the source where you supply your needs must be always bigger than you are. And thank God, nature is bigger than us. We have plenty there to supply the needs of our body. Plenty. We have water, we have air, we have all kinds of fruits and vegetables, whatever is there for us to feed our body the best. So we must eat and drink after we are born. That's no question. No one has an issue with that. But there comes something that we don't know also, is what happens with the spiritual umbilical cord. Is that going to be interrupted? Is that still existent? And how long must it be existent to mom? Now, this is what helped me to see the cause of diseases in children. The child has sicknesses, and they come to me into my practice. And as I understood that the child's spirit is dependent on mother's spirit, whenever the child has an affection, I must see what's going on in mother's life. And that sometimes is, like I said before, makes mothers feel guilty, but it's not. They're not. They must be aware that they are a source. And if they don't taste well, the child must get sick or protest. There are two ways of a child's reaction. It either becomes sick or it reacts rebellious. Saw this in the family. They had two girls. The one was 10, the other was 9 or 11 and 10. They were close together. The older girl was always sickly. And now you have a sick child, you take care for it and all this. But the younger child was always rebellious. And the parents had great issues, not with the sick child, but with the younger child. So they were in a conflict. But both children had the same issue, but they reacted differently. So you have in one family a person that becomes addicted to drugs or to games or whatever addiction, and the other gets a disease. One of the children got psoriasis and the other got the addictions. So we have these two kinds of reactions basically that the child has on a sad or unhappy mother, or on a mother that is not there. So those are the two things. Either the child picks up something that it is not fitting to its needs, or the connection is interrupted because this connection must be together there in the first 7 to 8 years. So in these years, the mother and the child should not be separated. I mean, not so far that this wireless connection interrupts. It could be measured in tests that they were done, measuring the electricity of the brain of the mother and the electricity of the brain of the child. They could see that whenever mother chose to change its electricity, when it changed the electricity in her brain, the child changed it immediately as well. And they were wondering how that has happened. And that happens until a certain distance between them. They don't need to see each other, but whenever mother changes her electricity, the child also switches to that. And that's why they invented the mirror neurons. They said, well, there must be mirror neurons, because in the scientific world, you don't have a spirit, you just have neurons, and you think neurons think. And so you must think that the neurons of the child mirror in the neurons of the mother. Those are scientific fantasies which are, by the law of nature, impossible. But sounds good. Mirror neurons. Yeah, there is no such thing. It's the spirit that makes the electricity, because the neurons cannot make electricity for themselves. They cannot provide their own electrical power and use it. It's not possible. It's like a car would make its own electricity or its own fuel. It's not possible. That's absolutely impossible by the law, by the basic law of nature. So in this way, we must understand that the one that makes the electrical waves, that is, by the decisions of the Spirit, he puts all those into action. This is why it is so important to understand the umbilical cord. It's not the brain that makes the input. It's the spirit that makes the input. And the spirit of the child is connected to the spirit of the mother. That's why they change, or the child changes electricity like a mother changes it. But when you separate the child more than that, by giving it into a child care center very early, or then into kindergarten, then you will find both reactions. And I would say there is none child that does not react to that sooner or later. Either the child becomes very obvious in its behavior, that's wrong, or it becomes sick. There's only this two way of it. And when we go then later on in life, at the age of teenage or at the early 20s, you will find all those mental diseases that we have that are a dysfunction of the brain coming from the way the child believes and thinks what it happens in its childhood. Almost every disease that is strongly, where the brain is affected, we can trace back to the relationship of the child to its parents, or the relationship of the parents to each other. So that's why the most important thing is to understand this umbilical cord, this spiritual dependency. The child must take a good food from mother, and mother must be available. I can say many stories, I just mentioned a few. One mother, at the age of 3, sent her child to the kindergarten, and after 4 days, the child got sick. The child comes home, stays home for 2 weeks to recover from sickness. Then she sends it back to the kindergarten, and in 4 days, the child gets the same sickness. And then the child stays at home for 2 weeks, and then she sends it back the 3rd time. The mother does that 8 times or 9 times until she comes to my practice to see me. Why does the child get sick? Well, the child gets sick because of the separation of the umbilical cord from mom. The kinder care persons who take care for the children can be the most loving people. They might be very well trained in educating a child, but it does not matter. The umbilical cord is subconscious. The child only has his mom as source. It cannot take the others as a source. It can take it, as an additional source, but the main source is mother. You can see this if you look to your children, or you don't have children, but you see your own life, you will see that clear dependency of the child's orientation after mother. That's why the most issues that we have on the earth is because of the mother relationship. Because that's a binding that is there from the beginning. And as we don't even know about it, we don't deal with it correctly. Now, in the childhood, the child has no choice to deal with it because it has no reason to show it to him in a broader way, like you can show it to an adult. So that's why we must teach the mothers to understand how the children function and how they are dependent spiritually from their mind and from what they think and do. So separation from mother leads to a disease. But what happens when the mother is sad? What happens then? And I had a case where the child got sad because mother was unhappy. And usually mothers get unhappy because the husband is not right. And in this case, the child got at the age of 6, if I remember well, leukemia. And they treated it with the normal treatment. They exchanged their bone marrow. And during this whole hospital time, the mother and the father were having their places on each side of the bed. And when the child recovered from disease, one day she told to her mom and said, "Mom, can I have also fake cancer?" And then the mother says, "Why do you want fake cancer?" "Well, if I would have fake cancer, then I could bind you both to me." Because the mother is unhappy because of the separation from the father. The child is unhappy because it has the need that both should love each other and be in harmony. And now she becomes sick because she has this subconscious, and at this age she also could express her need for harmony between them so that mother is happy. Mother was amazed, and then the child had a recurrent leukemia. The disease came back because the child's needs, the child was putting on force. It would have forced mother and father to stay together. An unconscious process. And they did the same procedure, but the child did not survive. Mother realized what was going on only a week or two before the child passed away. Because we're not aware of the need of a child to have a happy mother and, of course, a happy family. So life is serious, and it's serious on spiritual dependency. A child cannot choose its parents, cannot choose things to be different. The child must depend on the Spirit. But how long? When does the spirit of mother or of father or of anyone becomes insufficient? Well, that lecture first the mother and the father needs to learn. So they must know they should be as adults. And even before adulthood, we must know that the spirit of a human is insufficient. So the child needs to take away the umbilical cord. And since the spirit acts from inside, only the child can take away its connection to mom. It's not the mom that can disconnect it. It's only the spirit that has to disconnect himself. And he must do that, I would say, consciously, by explaining how things work. But the mother needs to be bound or unbound from her wrong relationship, and as humans have not the need, because they are equal with us, are the same species, just the child has for a while, because it's not ready yet in its growing, a dependency of the mother and father. Parents needs to become dependent on that one source of love that is God. And they must take that love, trusting God, in order to become free from each other, to not be dependent on something that cannot satisfy. So the child needs educated. And the biblical concept is that by the age of 12, the child should be unbound from mother and bound to God, so that the child would not need its mother anymore as source. But no one is teaching us that. That's why people at the age of 50 are so dependent on their mother and are not even aware of it, because it's a subconscious dependency. You see, when the child is born with this wrong identity, it binds itself to the spirit of the mother in order to take. But then comes in the father, and it takes from father as well. Then come in the grandmother and the grandfather, and the child binds itself also in order to take. Then comes the brother along, the child that comes after the brother binds to the spirit of the brother. Then comes the friend along and you bind yourself to the friend spirit in trust, and then the neighbors, and every relationship. The child binds itself. It adds umbilical cords, all for the purpose to take. That's why people think the more friends they have, the better they're off. That's why Facebook and all this social media can grow, because everyone has the need for relationship. It's just that we use it the wrong way. So while we think we're gods, we think we're independent on those around us. But at the same time, we think that everyone needs to give us that what we need. So the child depends or demands from mother love and respect. The child demands from the father the same thing. The child demands from the grandmother. And if they don't fulfill his needs or his wishes, then he gets angry with them. They fight with the brother, with the friend. And so everything becomes a fighting in between us, because everyone sees the other one as the source of his needs. And if someone is a religious person, he demands from God to be loved. So you see, the deception as being a god makes you to sit on the throne, expecting from others to serve you, to worship you. And we saw that yesterday in our lectures. So as a conclusion of the matter, why is there a conflict between mother-child and child-mother? Because both of them are gods. And both of them bind itself to each other with an umbilical cord of dependency. It's not that they bind in love to share love. Like that's why how we were made. At the beginning of the channel should be God, and at the output of the channel should be our human relationships. Then we could share everything we take from God. And imagine you have relationship in which you just share the love. You share the time. You share in marriage the physical, the body together. You just share. And by sharing, you become happy. But now, through the error, we think it's all ours. And at the same time, the deception leads to this terrible thing that we eat each other up. Because the conflict comes only because one is dependent on the other for his main reason in life, for his purpose in life, because they see in love the purpose. This is the most greatest and most terrible thing in us humans, that we depend spiritually on each other. That we would depend physically on each other, that's fine. One helps the other in physical things, and someone can prepare the food for me. That's not a dependency. You can go to the restaurant. It must be not your wife or your whoever it is. It doesn't matter. When it's about physical things, we can be dependent, but it won't make us any issues. All the issues of man come because he's dependent from another man, or from more than other men. More persons. And why are we all dependent of each other? Why is that so? Because both of them have the same wrong identity. Both of them believe they're gods. Both of them believe they're independent, while they behave completely dependent. This is why we have a fight in the most nicest relationship that should exist between a mother and a child. A mother should never be rude to her child. A mother should always be kind. Now you could say, well, the child should also be kind to mom. Yes, but who comes first? It's mother who comes first, and then the child. Because mother has a reason. Mother can judge and say, okay, what works better? The child can do that. So it's so important to understand that we are destroying ourselves, fighting each other, wanting from something from each other that the other does not even have. It's like, I compare it, searching water in the desert, taking in that sand and thinking it is water. You must spew it out because it cannot satisfy nothing in you. All human problems have just one cause. It's the button by which we start our thinking, by which we start every action in our life, is who we are. Who am I? And if this button would be correct and the truth, because it's a spiritual button, not a physical one, if humans would know their right identity, they would act correctly. And there would be never an issue between us. We would share the love that we take from God. And we would just be nice people to each other because none of them needs anything spiritual from the other. And he does not lean on the other for spiritual decisions. He's not bound to them. He can make decisions independent on them. You see, as a physician, I must be true to the cause, to the truth. And I must confront my patient with the issue he has. There is no judging, there is no accusation. It's just a revelation of the deep thing he has in him. But if I would be dependent on him, I could not reveal to him what's wrong with him. You see, you cannot and never be loving to a person if you depend on him for love. Because then it's about you, you do everything. And I as a physician must be independent on my patients. How could I help them if I would need them for myself? So I work to be there for them, but I don't need them to give me something back. I could never be just, or I could never be really loving if I would need my patient for my income, for my own sustaining life. Then I would live in a total dependency from them. And this is what I learned, and this is also what I teach. So in our next lectures, I will come to the conclusion. Do we have a solution to our problem? Can we come out of that what is our issues in life? Or have we no solution? And I promise you there is a solution. And we're very happy. I'm very happy to know that every one of us could be free in his mind and could be healthy in his body. But for this, we must be attached and bound to the right source on spiritual level. Because you can never drink water from the sea that is with salt water. It will kill you. The same thing happens that we drink the waters of human love, in quotations, and we must die from it. We must live a miserable life and finally pass away unhappy. But I want to change that. Thank God that He helped me to change that in my life. And I will share also my experiences in the coming lectures.